Yep, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jason from Getaway RV, and I'm going to give you a run through on the Bigfoot Camper. So I'm just going to start at the driver's side front. What we've got here is your compartment for your sewer hose. That's where that is stored. We've got your fresh water tank fill here. So if you go to a campsite where there's no hookups, you can fill the tank up before you get there. What we have here is your city water hookup. So if you go to a campsite where they have direct water hookups, you should use a non-toxic water hose, and you should also use a water pressure regulator. This is a sewer flush. I would use a different hose than you would use on your city water, just for hygienic reasons. Now when you do this, there is a warning label here. You want to make sure that you have the termination valve for the black water in the open position. What has happened in the past is people have left their valve closed, hooked up to the sewer flush, and it's flooded the tank, flooded the toilet, flooded the unit, and that would be nasty. So always make sure your black water termination valve is open. Oh, there we go. This is your outside shower. This is service access to the hot water heater. You have a drain plug on the bottom left-hand side for winterizing or storage purposes. This is service access for your furnace and the exhaust vent. Here we have the hookup for your electrical. So if you go to a campsite where there's plug-ins, we have supplied a cord for you. You would plug that in there, plug the other end into the campsite, or plug it in at home if you want to charge things up before you go. This is cable hookup. So if you go to a campsite where they have cable facilities, you could plug it in there. This is just a storage compartment, and your transfer switch for your generator is also located in there as well. Another storage compartment, that's where your electrical cord is, and your cord adapter if you're plugging in at home. So this will be a little easier for you because normally you're going to have it on your pickup truck, but your sewer cap is located underneath. Right there. So once you've hooked your sewer up, in this compartment there's two valves. There's a black valve, and it's actually a black handle, and a gray valve, gray handle. Black water is toilet water, the gray water is kitchen water waste. So what you want to do when you are emptying it, empty the black water first by pulling the valve, let it all flush out. Once it's all flushed out, close the valve, and then empty the gray water second. If you're going to a campsite where there's full hookups, you can leave your gray water open all the time, but leave the black valve closed until the tank is at least 2/3 full. That way there's lots of pressure behind it, and when you open up the valve, it gives it a good flush out. The blue line over in the corner there is the drain for the freshwater tank. Here we have your generator. There's a key for it, so I can't open this up right now, but there is a start switch here. But you can also start the generator from inside. In the bottom corner, if you open this access, there is a breaker. So if you had the generator running but you weren't getting 110 volt power inside, you can check and make sure that breaker has not been tripped. This is your battery storage. You should check the water level in the battery periodically. So periodically being about every 6 weeks. If you need to top it up, you can top it up with distilled water. You should have gloves on and put some eye protection on as well. If you're plugged into the campsite, you can utilize these plugs, 110 volt plugs. This is service access to the fridge and ventilation. Propane tanks are here. So there's 2 tanks. You can operate it one of 2 ways. You can simply open one tank at a time, and then when it runs out, you'll know it. Propane will shut off and come out and open the other one. Or you can open up both tanks. There's an arrow on the regulator. You can point it in either direction. So right now it's pointing this way, which means it'll run on this tank first. Once this tank is empty, it'll automatically switch over. Now when it switches over, this green in the window here will turn red. So if you come out, arrows this way, that's red, you know it's now running on the other tank. The other thing I'll mention with the tanks is when you open them as slow as you can. If you open up a propane tank too quickly, it's got a safety feature in the system and it'll lock itself out, it'll shut down. If that happens, you would have to disconnect the tanks and reconnect them for it to reset. In here, we've got a hookup for barbecue if you had an RV barbecue. It is a low pressure system, so you would have to use a low pressure barbecue that doesn't already have a regulator on it. Okay. Just in the doorway here, you have a battery disconnect. So when you're storing the camper, you want to keep that shut off. When you want to use the camper, turn it to the use, and that will give you 12-volt power inside. Now, when you're driving or plugged into power, make sure that switch is on. If it is in a store position, when you're driving or plugged in, it will not charge. Okay. We have to wipe the floor down when we're done, but you've got your stove here. When you get to where you're going and you've turned your propane on, it's always a good idea to light one of the stove burners first, just to get the propane flowing through the system. What can happen is you can get air in the system, which can make things difficult to light. So to turn them on, you could use a barbecue lighter, or it does have a sparker on here. See, we've got it going there. Should have the fan running while you're cooking as well, just to let any heat, moisture escape. Okay, I'll shut that off in a sec. I just want to get the air out of the system. One thing I want to mention is the burners are for cooking purposes only. In no way should they be used as a form of heat. Okay, the oven, you would want to use a barbecue lighter. You would turn it to pilots. In the back, right where my finger's pointing, there's a thermocouple. You need to turn it to pilot, hold that pilot button in, and hold your lighter into that thermocouple. Sometimes it'll take maybe 30 seconds. Once it's lit, keep this button pushed in for another 20 seconds-ish. Let it go. If the pilot remains on, then you can turn it to whatever temperature you want to cook at. If you're camping somewhere for a prolonged period of time, you could just turn it back to pilot. That way you don't have to keep relighting it each time you want to use it. My preference for you would be that you just turn it completely off. That's off now. Let it cool down before we close the lids. Have a light on here also. This is your monitor panel. And if I push levels test, it tells me the levels of everything. So you always go by the top light in the row. So battery is good. Fresh water, look over here, is 2/3 full. Black water is empty. Gray water is 1/3 full. So that gray water being 1/3 full is just from testing. So we'll open up that valve before you take it. Water pump, that's if you're using water from the freshwater tank. So I'm just gonna turn that on, make sure the tap is pointing over the sink. Pump on, run the water, and hear the pump running. There we go, shut it off. Now if you notice the pump went off as well, it is a demand pump, which means when the system is pressurized, when I turn the tap off, the pump will shut off as well. You do have to have enough water in the freshwater tank for it to pressurize properly. So my preference with this is turn the pump on, do your dishes, brush your teeth, have your shower, whatever you're doing. I find it's a good habit when you're done with it for a while, or you're going out, sleeping, whatever, just shut the switch off. Okay, over here we've got your fridge. It's got an on-off switch on the left and a switch here. So I'm gonna just turn it on. So when I turn it on, I just push this button in for auto. So what that means is it will automatically run on electric first. If there's no electric, it'll switch over to propane. So it'll always take electric as its first choice and propane as its second choice. If the check light comes on, it means it did not succeed in lighting, in which case just repeat the process. Make sure you turn the propane tanks on, make sure you don't have any air in the lines. Temperature control is right here, just push it. Temperature control does vary a lot on ambient temperature outside, so if it's really hot, you'd want to have the temperature to a more cooler setting. Now, if I'm plugged in and I want to run on propane, I would turn the auto button off, and that way just the gas light would come on. All right, I'm going to shut that down. Down at my feet here is a propane detector. So if it detects any leaks, it'll start beeping audibly. That is wired into the main RV battery. So one hint is if you hear this chirping periodically, you might want to check and make sure your batteries aren't low. Low voltage will cause the detectors to chirp periodically, but obviously if it goes off, you do want to investigate and see what's happening. Okay, over here, let rod squeeze in. Swap positions. We have your air conditioning controls. So if I turn the dial over to the blue section here, that's the air conditioning portion of it. If I turn it over to the gray section, that is fan only. You do have slight control of temperature, not to a great degree, but you can adjust your temperature here. You do have to be plugged in for this to operate, or have the generator running. One more thing, there is a switch down here. If you are plugged in and you want to use your microwave, you would have to have this switch up. Actually, do we have a microwave? No, we don't have a microwave. So disregard that, but if you want to run your hot water heater on 110 volts, you do have to have the switch down to water heater. And then one more switch below the sink. The lightning bolt is for electric for the hot water heater. So I'd have the main switch on, which is giving me power, and then I would just turn that switch on right there. So that is electric for your hot water. If I want to run it on propane, I can turn this switch on here. And in a moment, we should be able to hear it ignite. The forklift running in the background, so I can't quite hear it, but just with that forklift running, I'm just going to stick my head out and see if I can hear it running. It is running, it's running beautifully, so it's working. If this light illuminates here, it means it did not succeed in lighting, and I'd have to turn it off, try again, make sure my propane is turned on, etc. Okay, switch right here is for the generator. I would just hit the start button. Okay, generator's running. So there is a transfer switch which we've seen in the rear driver's side compartments. It does take a moment for the transfer switch to kick over to a generator. So we'll just back up to the air conditioner and we'll see if we can turn that on for a second.